There's a certain kind of quiet strength that doesn't always raise its voice, my tired friends, but it still changes the direction of things over time. So begins the story we're about to share tonight. I'm glad you're here to sit with me because we're stepping into a moment when thousands of women discovered exactly how much power they possessed, not through anger, not through noise, but through clarity, discipline, and an absolute conviction that change was possible. By the steady warmth of a fire, whether it's real or imagined, we're easing into March 1913 in Washington, D.C. It's a story about a procession that was supposed to be quiet and orderly. Instead, it became a moment when the nation couldn't look away. Before we go further, I want you comfortable. Draw a blanket closer, dim the lights if you need to. This story unfolds slowly, moment by moment. Not everything happens at once. But when it does happen, when these women finally claim the space they've earned, you'll understand why this day changed everything. Tonight you'll walk beside them through every moment of that remarkable day. You'll feel what they felt. You'll understand what they understood. And you'll see what quiet strength actually looks like when thousands of people choose to believe in something bigger than themselves. The date is March 4th, 1913. A cold spring morning in the nation's capital. And thousands of women are about to change the course of American history. Now let's begin. You find yourself in a cramped office in Washington during the winter of 1912. The room smells of ink and paper and old wood, the scent of decades of bureaucracy and paperwork. Stacks of letters cover every available surface. Some have spilled onto the floor, creating paper drifts in the corners, like autumn leaves that no one bothered to sweep away. Your fingers are numb as you work. The cold has seeped into the office from the poorly fitted windows. When you reach for a pen, your hand trembles slightly, not from fear, but from the simple fact that the office has no heating. The window panes are so cold that frost forms on the inside edges despite the afternoon being well underway. You pull your shawl tighter around your shoulders and exhale. Your breath forms a small cloud in front of your face. Margaret Hart sits at a desk covered with maps of the capital city. She's 30 years old. Her dark hair is pulled back severely from her face in a style that suggests she has no time for vanity. The winter light coming through the window is weak and grey. It barely illuminates the cluttered space, but Margaret doesn't seem to notice the dimness. She doesn't seem to notice the cold either. Her hands move across the maps with purpose, the same precision as someone working in comfort. This is a woman who has learned to ignore her body's complaints. She has just returned from England, where she learned protest tactics from British suffragettes. She watched women chain themselves to railings outside Parliament. She saw hunger strikes and force feeding in prisons. She participated in window-smashing campaigns. She was changed by what she witnessed. The British movement taught her something fundamental. Polite requests achieve nothing. Only dramatic action forces change. She watched Emmeline Crawford, the leader of the British movement, convince women to sacrifice everything for a single moment of power. Now she wants to bring that energy to America. But American suffragists, she's discovered, tend toward genteel tactics. Tea parties, petition drives, polite conversations with people who already agree with them. Margaret finds this approach insufficient. She has been given a mandate: organize something spectacular for the day before President Wilson's inauguration. They want visibility, they want attention. Margaret intends to deliver both. She remembers London. 3 years ago now, but it feels recent. She had sat in the back of a crowded drawing room watching Emmeline Crawford speak to wealthy donors, women with money and power. Emmeline hadn't asked for charity. She'd painted a picture of transformation. "Your money will not be spent," Emmeline had said, in her measured, precise way. "It will be invested. You're not being asked to be charitable. You're being asked to choose history. Your money is the fuel for the moment when everything shifts, when women stop asking for permission and start demanding rights." The room had been silent. Then the checks had appeared. Margaret had watched the donors' faces. She'd seen the moment when they stopped viewing suffrage as an abstract ideal and started viewing it as a cause worthy of personal sacrifice. Emmeline had made them feel like they were part of something larger than themselves. She'd also witnessed the other side of British suffragism: the broken windows, the chained railings, the women force-fed in prison, the hunger strikes, the absolute refusal to compromise. One afternoon she'd stood outside a prison where Emmeline had been held. The woman had been force-fed through a tube for weeks. When she was released, she looked skeletal, but her eyes were still fierce. Margaret had asked her, "Was it worth it?" Emmeline had looked at her directly. "The cost isn't what matters. The necessity is what matters, and this is necessary. Change doesn't come from politeness. It comes from people who are willing to be inconvenient, who are willing to demand, who are willing to sacrifice." Margaret had absorbed this. She'd carried it back to America like a seed. Now, sitting in this cold office in Washington, she understands Emmeline's lesson differently. Not that she needs to be violent, but that she needs to be impossible to ignore. She needs to create a moment so undeniable, so powerful, so beautiful that the nation has to pay attention. She needs to create something that forces the question, how can we not give these women the vote? The National American Woman Suffrage Association has given her a mandate: organize something spectacular for the day before President Wilson's inauguration. They want visibility. They want attention. Margaret knows what American suffragism currently looks like. It looks like tea parties in church basements. It looks like petition drives that no one signs. It looks like speeches delivered to audiences who already agree. It looks like 200 women gathered in a small hall afterward, thinking they've accomplished something profound. She finds this approach insufficient. The timing is no accident. When a new president arrives in Washington, the city fills with visitors and journalists. Every hotel room gets booked months in advance. Every newspaper sends reporters to cover the festivities. The inauguration dominates national conversation for weeks. It's the biggest news story of the season. Margaret intends to use that attention. She wants suffragists inserted into every newspaper story about the inauguration. She wants their presence impossible to ignore. She spreads a map across her desk and traces Pennsylvania Avenue with one finger. The route runs from the Capitol to the White House. It measures exactly 1.9 miles of ceremonial importance. This avenue represents the heart of American government. Presidents travel it during inaugurations. Foreign dignitaries parade down it during state visits. Victory celebrations happen here. The idea forming in her mind is audacious. She wants to stage the largest parade for women's rights that America has ever seen. Not a march, not a demonstration, a procession, something that sounds inevitable, something dignified, and she wants it on Pennsylvania Avenue. On the day before Wilson takes office, the largest suffrage parade in American history attracted 3,000 people, and that was in New York City, which has a much larger population of activists than Washington. Margaret wants 6,000. Her colleagues think she's dreaming, but she's not dreaming. She's planning. And there's a difference. She starts sketching maps, formations, sections, categories. Each one represents hundreds of women. Each one proves something. By the end of the night, she has filled 20 pages with notes and sketches. The vision is complete in her mind. Now comes the hard work of making it real. Caroline Drake arrives carrying a stack of financial documents. Caroline has red hair and a sharp mind for organization. She also spent time with the British suffragettes, which is why Margaret trusts her with the numbers. But today she brings bad news. They have almost no money. The national organization has given them exactly $12 to start with, $12 to organize a parade that Margaret envisions including thousands of participants. Caroline's expression is grim as she sets the documents on the desk. "This is impossible," Caroline says flatly. "You can't organize 6,000 women to travel to Washington in March with $12. You can't even rent a single float. You can't pay for costumes or banners or anything else we need." Margaret just smiles. She's already begun writing. Right there at the desk, she pulls out fresh paper. "What are you doing?" Caroline asks. "Writing letters," Margaret says. "To wealthy supporters with $12. With an idea, Margaret replies. "The money is secondary." Caroline watches as Margaret's pen moves across the page. She doesn't understand yet what her colleague understands, but she's beginning to suspect. By the end of the night, Margaret has written 25 letters. Each one is personalized. Each one is designed for a different recipient. The letters to wealthy women about the historic importance of the moment. The letters to working women about solidarity. The letters to women with small amounts of savings asking for what they can afford. "These will bring in money?" Caroline asks, still skeptical. "These will bring in money," Margaret confirms, "because they don't ask for charity. They ask people to be part of history." Caroline begins to understand. This woman doesn't see obstacles. She sees solutions. The weeks that follow prove her right. The first week brings $8. The second week brings $45. The third week brings $200. By late January, they have accumulated $3,200. By February, $5,000. But beyond the money itself, something else happens. Women start arriving. Women who've read the letters. Women who've made the decision to sacrifice. A widow from Philadelphia sends $1,000 with a note. "I wish I could do this myself." A factory worker from Ohio sends 50 cents wrapped in newspaper with another note. "This is all I have, but it's for something that matters." These aren't just donations, they're declarations of faith. Margaret doesn't work alone. She builds a team. Helen Mendez is an artist with a creative mind for publicity. She designs a poster of a woman in classical robes carrying a liberty torch. The image appears on everything from postcards to banners to lapel buttons. One of Helen's most brilliant ideas is creating small purple and gold ribbons, the colors of suffrage. They cost almost nothing to produce, but soon these ribbons appear on coats throughout Washington. Even people who cannot march can show support by wearing the colors. Virginia Cole handles recruitment and community organizing. She travels to every state. She speaks to suffrage organizations in every region. She coordinates with local groups. The parade becomes real when local women in Vermont, California, Mississippi, and Iowa begin organizing delegations to travel to Washington. Virginia is the one who makes them believe it's actually possible. And then there's Caroline Drake, who transforms an empty building on F Street into campaign headquarters. Within days, the empty building becomes something alive. Volunteers arrive carrying borrowed furniture dragged from attics and basements. Someone donates a dozen typewriters that clatter constantly throughout the day. Another supporter provides a telephone line that rings incessantly. The walls soon fill with charts tracking parade preparations. One massive chart lists every state in the Union. Beside each state name, volunteers mark the number of expected marchers. The numbers start small but grow steadily. Another chart tracks the recruitment of marchers from different professions: doctors, lawyers, teachers, nurses, social workers, artists. Alice divides the work into departments like a military campaign. One team handles publicity and media relations, another manages logistics and transportation, a third coordinates with local police and city officials. The publicity team proves particularly creative. They design posters, they organize meetings, they work with newspapers. One room becomes a costume workshop. Volunteers sew white dresses for marchers who cannot afford to provide their own. Other volunteers create elaborate allegorical costumes for the floats. The headquarters buzzes with activity every day. Seamstresses work in one corner, altering costumes to fit different body types. Artists paint banners in another area, using bold letters visible from blocks away. Volunteers fold and address letters requesting more donations. Someone has the idea to include a herald on horseback at the front of the procession. Margaret immediately sees the dramatic potential. A woman on horseback will capture attention and look magnificent in photographs. The herald will ride ahead of the main procession wearing a flowing cape. She will carry a trumpet to announce the parade's approach. Her appearance will signal that something significant is about to happen. Finding the right person for this role takes several interviews. The woman must ride exceptionally well. She must look comfortable in costume. She must also believe deeply enough in suffrage to accept the attention and potential ridicule. A lawyer named Catherine Wright volunteers for the position. She rides expertly and possesses striking looks that photograph beautifully. She is tall and graceful with dark hair that flows dramatically. But more than that, she understands what she's representing. When Margaret asks her if she understands the role isn't about vanity, Catherine nods immediately. "You want the first image the newspapers see to be a woman?" Catherine says. "Not a symbol of womanhood, an actual woman, strong, capable, leading something important." "Then yes," Margaret says. "You'll do it." Margaret's own mother, Elizabeth Hart, arrives at the office one afternoon. She's 75 years old and Margaret expects her to stay home. Instead, she tells her daughter, "I'm marching." "I don't care if they arrest me. I'm marching." Margaret tears up. "It might be dangerous," she says. Her mother takes her hand. "I'm 75 years old. I've spent my whole life being safe. It hasn't changed anything. One day, I want to be brave." Margaret works late into the night designing the parade's visual language. She understands something fundamental. This isn't about a debate. This is about images. This is about proof. She sketches out sections for the parade. Her handwriting is precise and efficient. Every letter formed with purpose. College students will march together wearing their academic robes. The sight of educated women pursuing degrees will contradict claims about female intellectual inferiority. Working women will march in their everyday clothes. Factory workers and shop clerks will demonstrate that women support themselves financially. They deserve political representation just as male workers do. There will be floats carrying living tableaus depicting famous women from history. There will be foreign delegations showing international support. There will be state delegations demonstrating the geographic breadth of the movement. But the genius of Margaret's strategy isn't in any single element. It's in the whole. The parade will be a visual argument. Every marcher is evidence. Every section is proof. Every banner is a statement. The newspapers won't be able to argue against what they see, because it will be real, it will be there, it will be undeniable. Margaret calculates that she needs at least 6,000 women to make the visual impact she wants. 6,000 marchers will fill Pennsylvania Avenue. They will create an image impossible to dismiss, an image impossible to ignore, an image impossible to forget. Her friends think she's dreaming, but she's not dreaming. The parade route requires official approval from the city government. This process involves multiple meetings with bureaucrats who seem uninterested in helping. Alice meets with the superintendent of police multiple times to discuss logistics and security. The superintendent is a tired-looking man named Richard Walsh. He clearly wishes the suffrage procession would happen somewhere else, or not at all. At their first meeting, Walsh leans back in his chair and sighs. "I'm concerned about your parade," he says. "The procession," Margaret corrects gently. "We call it a procession." Walsh's jaw tightens. "March, procession, demonstration, it doesn't matter. The point is, thousands of women on the most important day of the year, the president's inauguration. The city will be packed. I have to manage inauguration traffic. I have to manage the president's security. I have to manage foreign dignitaries. And now I'm supposed to manage a women's suffrage parade on the same day." "We don't require management," Margaret says. "We have our own organization. We have marshals. We have discipline." "That's what they always say," Walsh replies. "I've been doing this job for 25 years. I've seen peaceful events turn into riots with no warning. You put thousands of people on Pennsylvania Avenue, the most public street in the city, and anything can happen." Margaret leans forward. "Then I trust you've prepared the police department to protect citizens if anything happens." Walsh's jaw tightens further. He didn't expect her to say it so plainly. "I'll grant you a permit for the route," he says. "Pennsylvania Avenue is public property. Other groups march down it, but I won't guarantee security. My department is understaffed. We'll do our best, but I can't promise adequate protection." "Can't or won't?" Margaret asks. "Both," Walsh says coldly. Margaret stands. She's smaller than him, but her posture is rigid, immovable. She pulls out her leather-bound notebook and begins writing. "I'm taking notes," she says. "For the newspapers, for history. Every meeting, every warning, every statement about your department's inability to protect citizens exercising their rights." She walks toward the door without waiting for his response. Behind her, she hears him call out, "Don't threaten me, Miss Hart." But she doesn't turn around. On the walk back to headquarters, Caroline asks, "What happened?" "He's protecting himself," Margaret says. "He knows violence is likely, otherwise why would he be protecting himself in advance?" "What does this mean for the parade?" Caroline asks. "It means we can't rely on police," Margaret replies. "It means we organize our own security. It means every woman who marches does so knowing that official authorities won't help. And it means the newspapers will be asking very interesting questions if anything goes wrong. Letters start arriving at headquarters, not supportive letters, threatening ones. The National Association Against Women's Suffrage warns that disruption will not be tolerated. We will not stand idle while radical women attempt to hijack the president's inauguration. If you proceed with this parade, you will face consequences. Other letters are more veiled but no less threatening. Women's groups that oppose suffrage, business interests afraid of what women voters might do, men who feel threatened by women claiming public space. Margaret shares these letters with her team. She doesn't hide them. She doesn't minimize them. "This means we're winning," she says. "Otherwise, why would they bother?" The fear, though, is real. In the weeks leading up to the parade, women call the office asking questions. Will it be safe? What if they attack? What if women get hurt? What if we're arrested? Margaret doesn't dismiss these fears. She acknowledges them, but she also prepares. She works with Caroline to organize unofficial security. They identify volunteers who will watch for trouble. They establish signal systems so they can communicate down the line. They train marshals on how to respond if disruption begins. The strategy is simple: protect without retaliation. Keep marching, keep dignity. This is their power. Sarah is a woman from Vermont. She's 52 years old and she's never done anything like this before. She's never been part of something larger than herself. She sends a letter to headquarters. "Can I march? I've never been a rebel. I've never broken any rules. What if I can't walk the whole distance?" Margaret responds personally. "Then we have automobiles for you. But know that your presence, even if you ride part of the way, matters." Lucy is a young woman from Iowa. She's 19 years old and she's terrified. Her mother thinks she shouldn't go. Her mother thinks women shouldn't do this. But Lucy decides anyway. She arrives in Washington with 50 cents in her pocket and a heart full of fear. When Margaret sees her, she puts an arm around her. "There is no guarantee of safety," she says, "but I promise you this, you won't be alone. Thousands of us are coming." Margaret's own mother, Elizabeth, arrives with a suitcase. She's 75 years old, and Margaret thought she would stay home. But she couldn't miss this. She tells her daughter, "I'm marching. I've spent my whole life being safe." It hasn't changed anything. These aren't political activists. These are ordinary women. Women with fears, women with doubts, but women who believe that something matters more than safety. Margaret calls a meeting of all volunteers. She stands in front of them and she speaks with absolute clarity. "We march in white," she says. "We march in silence unless instructed. We march in straight lines. We march with dignity." Why? Because if we look beautiful, disciplined, respectable, the photographs will show that. And if violence comes from them, the contrast will be devastating. They will be the barbarous ones. We will be the civilized ones. She establishes specific protocols. Volunteers practice marching in formation in silence. Marshals receive training on how to handle disruption, how to help, how to respond without retaliation. First aid volunteers receive training in case of injury. Signal systems are established so information can travel down the line quickly. The equipment is prepared with meticulous attention. Costumes are fitted, banners are reinforced, floats are tested, colors are verified, purple, gold, white, all vivid and visible. The final question comes from a young woman. "What if they try to stop us?" Margaret's answer is clear. "Then we prove that we're stronger, not through fighting back, but through keeping going, through keeping dignity, through showing the nation what we believe in." Margaret stands alone in the headquarters office. It's March 3rd, 1913. Tomorrow morning it begins. Everything is prepared. The costumes hang in neat rows. The banners are rolled and ready. The floats are decorated and waiting. The maps show every section, every route, every contingency. Thousands of women are in Washington tonight or arriving tomorrow morning. The police have warned they can't protect them. Opposition groups have promised to disrupt. The weather forecast is cold and possibly rainy. The stakes couldn't be higher. Margaret doesn't know if it will work, but she knows it has to happen. She knows the cost of doing nothing is higher than the risk of trying. She stands at the window looking out at the dark Washington streets. Tomorrow these streets will be alive. Tomorrow 6,000 women will walk down Pennsylvania Avenue. Tomorrow everything changes or nothing changes. But either way, they'll have tried. She touches her hand to the cold window. Tomorrow. It all begins tomorrow. The trains pull into Washington every hour. Women step out onto platforms. Some have traveled 3 days, some have raised their own money, some have risked their reputations to be here. Anna and her daughters arrive from California. California women already have the vote they won in 1911, but they've come 2,000 miles to show solidarity. We want to show other states what you can have, Anna tells Margaret. We want to show that this is real, that women voting works. Elizabeth arrives alone from Mississippi. Her family didn't approve. She came anyway. She hasn't told them yet where she is. This matters more than their disappointment, she tells a fellow marcher. The Nebraska group arrives together, 12 women who've pooled their money for train tickets. They wear matching sashes. They sing together in the train car. Songs of the movement, songs of hope. The boarding houses fill up. Families welcome strangers. Women sleep 4 or 5 to a room. No one complains. Everyone is buzzing with nervous energy. One evening, a young girl, maybe 16, helps an elderly woman prepare her dress. The old woman, whose name is Harriet, has been waiting for this for 50 years. "I have waited my whole life for this," Harriet tells the girl. "We're here now," the girl replies. "Yes," Harriet says, and she cries, "We're finally here." Last-minute preparations at headquarters turn into something almost sacred. In the costume department, volunteers finish final fittings. A woman's dress is torn slightly at the seam. Volunteers stay up all night fixing it. "No one marches in anything less than perfect," someone says. At the banner station, final touch-ups are completed. Someone paints over a spelling mistake. The newspapers will photograph these. Everything must be perfect. Marshal volunteers receive final briefing on how to handle chaos. If violence starts, your job is to protect, not fight. Keep marching, keep dignity. This is our power. In the map room, Margaret reviews Pennsylvania Avenue one more time. Every section, every route, every contingency. Caroline is with her checking logistics. Helen is sketching how different angles will photograph. Virginia has the list of every marcher from every state. The mood is electricity mixed with fear, excitement mixed with doubt, but underneath, unshakable conviction. Around 3 in the morning, Margaret steps outside. The city is silent. Tomorrow, this city will be chaos. But right now, it's peaceful. Stars are visible above Washington despite the city lights. Cold air, clear sky. Perfect weather for a revolution, she whispers to herself. March 4th, 1913. Dawn breaks cold and clear. The weather is better than they hoped. Not rain, not snow. Just cold, 40 degrees maybe, but clear skies and good light for photographs. Women dress in darkness, putting on white dresses, pinning purple and gold sashes, adjusting hair, some putting on courage like a costume. Sarah from Vermont looks at herself in the mirror. She doesn't recognize herself. White dress, sash hair, pinned back. "Is this me?" she whispers. "Am I really doing this?" Then she takes a deep breath. "Yes, you are." Margaret's mother Elizabeth gets ready with steady hands and a thundering heart. After 75 years, she's finally participating in something that matters. Catherine the Herald brushes her white horse in darkness. She speaks to it quietly. "We're about to change the course of history," she says. "Or at least be part of trying." The gathering points come alive as women assemble at assigned locations. College women in academic robes at one location, working women at another, professionals at another, state delegations with their banners. The fear is visible. Many women are crying, nervous, excited, scared. Some are singing, some are holding hands, some are silent, lost in their thoughts. Margaret and her team count marchers, 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, more than 5,000. By the time they reach Pennsylvania Avenue, nearly 6,000 women are assembled. All the women standing in their sections, all organized, all ready. All the men, some supporters, some hostile, lining the streets. All the journalists ready with cameras. All the police positioned or absent. all the anti-suffrage protesters waiting for chaos. Before the parade starts, there's a moment of absolute silence. Thousands of women standing still, the morning cold making breath visible. Everyone understanding this is the moment. Everything changes from here. Margaret stands at the front. She doesn't shout. She raises her arm. Catherine the Herald on horseback raises her trumpet. The sound echoes across Washington, clear, commanding, undeniable. The procession is beginning. The horses move forward. 6,000 women follow, in formation, in silence, in white, with purple and gold. What the observers see beauty where they expected aggression, dignity where they expected chaos, numbers beyond anyone's expectations, organization perfect, message overwhelming. Journalists' pens start moving immediately. As they move down Pennsylvania Avenue, the crowd on sidewalks grows, some people hostile, some people curious, some people moved. A man tries to block their path. Women simply redirect around him. No confrontation. They keep marching. He looks foolish. They look strong. A woman in the crowd weeps, watching thousands of women walking with dignity, asking for their rights. She stands, takes a step forward, joins the march. Newspaper photographers scramble to capture it all. This is the biggest story, someone shouts. The newspapers won't be able to ignore this. Police stand by, not protecting, not attacking, watching. Catherine rides at the front on her white horse, flowing cape, trumpet at her side. She's magnificent. Every photograph captures her. She becomes the symbol of the march immediately. The image that will appear in every newspaper. The image that will be Pennsylvania Avenue stretches 1.9 miles from Capitol to White House. First mile, the Capitol area, starting from Assembly Point, moving toward Pennsylvania Avenue. The crowd watching grows, some hostile, throwing things, shouting insults, most simply watching in amazement. A group of men blocks the street. They're anti-suffrage organized. They want to break the march. Marshal volunteers calm things. Women keep marching. The men look foolish. The women look strong, shouting and heckling. Go home. This is no place for women. You're unladylike. Not one marcher breaks formation. Not one marcher responds. Silence is stronger than shouting. Discipline is stronger than chaos. Someone throws an object. It misses but lands near a marcher. She doesn't flinch. She keeps walking. Others nearby, did you see that I did? She didn't even look. That becomes the story, their dignity despite hostility. Second mile. The heart of government. As they approach the White House, the crowd has grown exponentially. Thousands watching. Newspaper photographers everywhere. The symbolism is undeniable. Marching toward the seat of power. Women walking where only men have walked with authority. Every step a claim to space. Every banner a demand. The sections pass, each one a visual argument. College women in academic robes, visible proof of female education, walking past men who said women can't be educated. The message, you're wrong, we're here, we're educated. Working women in everyday clothes, factory workers, shop clerks, nurses, walking past men who said women don't work. The message, you're wrong. We're here, we work. We deserve representation. Professionals, doctors, lawyers, artists, teachers, walking past men who said women shouldn't have professional roles. The message, you're wrong. We're here, we're professionals. State delegations with banners. Vermont, California, Mississippi, Iowa, Nebraska, geographic proof that this isn't one city. This is a movement across America. Catherine continues riding at the front, the white horse, the flowing cape. Every photograph captures her. She becomes iconic. The image. As the march passes directly in front of the White House at the 1-mile mark, the moment shifts. Someone historians will never know who starts singing. My country, 'tis of thee, sweet land of liberty, of thee I sing. But the words change. This land is our land too. We're asking just for what is true, for women here to have a voice. The song spreads through the march. Thousands of voices singing, in unity, in power, in sorrow and hope mixed together. This is the moment, not a debate, not a logical argument, but an emotional truth. These are citizens, they deserve rights. For the listeners, the crowd, the journalists, the police, the shift happens here. From disruption to movement. From silly women to brave women asking for justice. The song carries the message beyond words. The song makes it real. Around mile 1.5 near the center of the parade, it happens. A group of hostile men surges forward. Not all at once, but from multiple points. They're trying to break the line. They're trying to stop the march. A man grabs a banner, tries to rip it from marchers' hands. Volunteer marshals quickly move. The man releases the banner. Marchers keep going. Shoving starts. Some men push into the line, trying to create chaos. Marchers stand firm, but don't push back. The discipline is stunning. Someone is knocked down. One of the hostile men, actually, falls in front of marchers. Marchers help him up. This moment is crucial. The contrast, the suffragists help even those attacking them. Police finally intervene, not to protect marchers, but to prevent the hostile men from escalating. Walsh's department makes a calculated choice. Contain it, don't let it become a riot. The march continues. The hostile men retreat. The marchers continue. Songs continue. The message, nothing stops us. This is the turning point in how people perceive the march. Before suffragettes disrupting the inauguration. After women asking for rights while facing violence. The newspapers will ask, why were the suffragists attacked, not why did they march? The march reaches the end, and not at the White House, but the march completes, all 6,000 women, all walking together, all arriving together. They stand in the street, thousands of women standing in silence, breathing heavily, hearts thundering, realizing we did it, we actually did it. Margaret sees her mother, embraces her, both crying, we did it, we actually did it. Women talking to reporters, we came to show that we're here, we're not going away. The government has to listen now. The herald. Catherine dismounts, the horse is exhausted, she's exhausted. She looks directly at a photographer. In that moment, history, the realization sets in. The newspapers will report this. They can't ignore it. The numbers are too big. The organization is too impressive. The discipline is too remarkable. The procession is over. The movement has begun. March 4th, 1913, evening. After the march ends, the exhaustion is profound. Women are physically spent. Some can barely walk. Some collapse into beds at boarding houses. Some are too energized to sleep. The emotion is complex. Relief that nothing catastrophic happened. Triumph that they pulled it off. Anger about the violence they faced. Pride in their courage. Fear about what comes next. Margaret doesn't sleep. She's in the headquarters office reading the first newspaper drafts. Reporters have already filed. The headlines hit like victory bells. 6,000 women demand suffrage in stunning march. Suffragists show discipline and numbers. Police fail to protect marchers from hostile crowds. A movement, not a disruption. The stories can't ignore it. Too many women, too organized, too peaceful, too beautiful. A critical quote from a journalist: "The suffragists showed more dignity under attack than their attackers showed with violence." Whatever one thinks about women's suffrage today proved something: these are organized, disciplined women with a message that matters. Margaret sits at her desk, the same desk where she planned this months ago, the desk where she imagined the impossible. Now the impossible has happened. She sits in silence. The weight of it, the relief of it, the just beginning of it. A few hours later, President Wilson's inauguration happens, but the story is already set. The newspapers have already moved on from the inauguration to the Women's March. The irony is profound. The women organized this for the day before the inauguration, specifically to steal attention. They succeeded. On his inauguration day, Wilson is the second story. The women are the first story. He's reportedly furious. But there's nothing he can do. The march is over. The newspapers have covered it. The message is set. Members of Congress who were ignoring suffrage can't anymore. They have to address it. They have to take positions. Do you support what happened to those women, they're asked? Either they side with the women or they side with violence. False choice, but effective. In the days following, everything changes. The newspapers continue to cover the march, some sympathetically, some critically, but all acknowledging its significance. Public opinion shifts. People who were neutral become supportive. Whatever I think about suffrage, women shouldn't be attacked. Whatever I think about suffrage, that many women showing up means something. Women's organizations suddenly energize. They didn't think the march was possible. Seeing it succeed changes everything. Other suffrage groups realize, if they can march on Pennsylvania Avenue, maybe we can do this. Volunteers increase. Women who were hesitant now want in. The headquarters becomes even busier. The movement gains momentum. The police department scandal erupts. Superintendent Walsh faces questions. Why weren't the marchers protected? Why did you allow violence? The very threat Margaret made becomes reality. He becomes the villain of the story, not because he's evil, but because he failed his duty. Margaret gives interviews. She's suddenly famous. Newspapers want to talk to her. She speaks with clarity and purpose. This is the first step, she tells them. This shows that women are organized. This shows that women won't go away. Now, the government has to listen. Other cities are inspired. They start planning their own events. They use the same playbook: beauty, discipline, numbers. The idea spreads. Sarah returns to Vermont. She's changed. The march changed her. I was part of something larger than myself, she tells everyone. I discovered I was brave. I discovered I wasn't alone. I discovered I could help change history. Women in her community listen. Women who were hesitant become believers. The march spreads its influence through personal testimony. Lucy marries eventually a man who was there, who witnessed her courage. He becomes a supporter. They have 3 daughters. Those daughters grow up in a world slightly closer to equality. Because of that one day in 1913, Margaret's mother Elizabeth lives 10 more years. She becomes elder of the movement. She speaks with authority. I was 75 when I marched, she tells women. If I can do it, you can do it. She becomes symbol of multi-generational commitment. Margaret herself continues the fight. She's arrested multiple times in coming years. She's force-fed in prison. She never gives up. She lives to see the 19th Amendment pass in 1920. She lives to see women voting. She lives to see women in positions of power. She dies in 1977, having lived to see the beginnings of real equality around mile 1.5 in the march, when they're directly in the center, where cameras can see everything. The hostile men surge forward. It starts small, one group from the left, another from the right. They're not coordinated, but they're all trying to break the march. They're all trying to stop 6,000 women from walking A man grabs a banner from a young woman's hands. She's barely 20 years old. She holds tight. He yanks harder. Her knuckles go white. Volunteer marshals see what's happening and move quickly. They don't need to fight. Their presence is enough. The man releases the banner. The woman stands there shaking but standing. She brushes her dress and keeps walking. Another section experiences pushing, real pushing, men trying to force their way into the line. The women stand firm but don't push back. They hold hands. They maintain formation. The men can't break them because they won't fight back. That's the brilliance of Margaret's strategy. Violence against passive resistance makes the violent look barbarous. Someone falls. A middle-aged woman trips under the pressure. People around her gasp, but immediately before anyone from the hostile crowd can celebrate, marchers help her up. They support her. They keep her standing. She keeps walking. The newspapers watch this moment. Woman attacked, woman helped by other women. Woman continues. That's the story. The police finally move, not to protect the marchers, but Walsh has made a calculation. If this becomes a full riot, the story is no longer women marching, but chaos in the streets. That's bad for the police department. Better to control the hostile men than let them escalate. Walsh's officers separate the attackers from the march. They create a buffer. They allow the march to continue. It's not protection of the marchers, but it's not abandonment either. In the middle of the chaos, individual women discover courage they didn't know they had. Sarah from Vermont. She's tired. Her feet hurt. The march is longer than she expected. She's nearly at her limit. Then the attack starts. A man shoves her. She could fall. She could give up. Instead, she stands taller. "I've come too far to stop now," she says aloud. She keeps marching. Her courage awakens something in women around her. They see an older woman choosing to stand firm. They find strength in her example. Lucy from Iowa. She's always been terrified. But seeing others' courage awakens something in her. When hostile men surge toward her section, instead of hiding, she steps forward. She links arms with the woman next to her. "We stand together," she says. They create a human chain. Men can't break through without actual violence. They back off. Lucy has discovered her own strength in this moment. Catherine the Herald on horseback. She sees the chaos. She doesn't flee. Instead, she rides toward the trouble. The horse, sensing her calmness, remains calm. She becomes a focal point. "Look at her," people say. She's not running. So neither do we. Her courage becomes the anchor. Everything holds together because she holds firm. Margaret's mother, Elizabeth, she sees her daughter's vision under attack. She's 75 years old. She pushes forward with surprising strength. She stands between hostile men and young marchers. "My name is Elizabeth Hart. I'm 75 years old, and I'm marching for the future. You'll have to go through me to stop us." Her age, her voice, her presence stops the immediate attack. She becomes symbol of multi-generational movement. Not when the police intervene, but when something emotional happens. A woman reporter named Margaret Watson is watching, rare for the time a female journalist covering the inauguration. But she's here to see the suffragists instead. She watches the hostile men attack. She watches the women respond with dignity. She watches a 75-year-old woman stand firm. She watches the Herald refuse to flee. She watches Sarah continue despite pain. She watches Lucy discover her own strength. She cries right there in the street. She cries, not from sadness, but from the beauty of it, from the courage of it, from the rightness of it. She turns to her editor, who's also watching, skeptical. This is the story she tells him, not the inauguration. Her article will be read across the country. Her tears will be remembered. Her question will be asked. How can anyone say these women shouldn't have the vote? When the march ends, there's a moment of absolute silence. Not peaceful silence, stunned silence. Thousands of women having endured attacks, still standing, still together, still believing. The images that emerge, the herald on her white horse, the women in white holding their lines, the older woman standing firm, the women helping those who fell, the disciplined sections continuing despite chaos. The narrative shifts. Before suffragists march despite police opposition, after women show courage and dignity under attack, the newspapers ask the question, how can anyone oppose people like this? The 1913 suffrage procession ends. But the movement it unleashed never ends. It grows, it spreads, it changes the nation. 7 years later, women get the vote. Not because they stopped fighting, but because they never stopped believing. In themselves, in each other, in the possibility of change. The march didn't immediately grant women the vote, but it marked the beginning of the end of opposition. It changed the conversation from should women have the vote to when will women get the vote. For the women who marched, something shifted inside. They discovered they were brave. They discovered they weren't alone. They discovered they could help change history. Sarah returns to Vermont, transformed. The march changed her. She tells everyone, women who were hesitant become believers. The march spreads its influence through personal testimony. Lucy marries a man who was there, who witnessed her courage. They have 3 daughters. Those daughters grow up in a world slightly closer to equality. Because of that one day, Catherine the Herald becomes famous. The photograph of her on horseback becomes iconic. It appears in newspapers across the country. It will be remembered for decades. She continues speaking for suffrage. She continues fighting. She never doubts again. Margaret's mother, Elizabeth, lives 10 more years. She becomes elder of the movement. She speaks with authority. I was 75 when I marched, she tells women. If I can do it, you can do it. She becomes symbol of multi-generational commitment. The immediate impact is political. Members of Congress who were ignoring suffrage suddenly can't. They have to take positions. The newspapers are asking them directly, do you support what happened to those women? The long-term impact is cultural. Women's organizations that were hesitant become energized. Other cities organize similar events. The idea spreads. The movement grows. The momentum becomes undeniable. Public opinion shifts. People who were neutral become supportive. Whatever I think about suffrage, women showed courage. Whatever I think about suffrage, that many organized women means something. Within months of the march, suffrage bills are introduced in Congress. Within a year, the movement has new energy. Within 7 years, the 19th Amendment passes. Within 8 years, women are voting. The march didn't cause these changes alone, but it marked the moment when the nation couldn't ignore the demand anymore. It was the moment that changed everything. This is a story about the power of vision, about the power of courage, about the power of ordinary women doing extraordinary things. Margaret Hart dreamed something impossible. Caroline Drake helped make it real. Catherine Wright rode at the front. Helen Mendez designed it beautifully. Virginia Cole brought women from across the nation. Elizabeth Hart at 75 stood firm. Lucy discovered her own strength. Sarah continued despite pain. Margaret Watson, the reporter, cried at the beauty of it. And 6,000 women marched, not because they knew they would win, but because they believed they should try, because they believed something mattered more than safety. because they believed in each other. The march was over in 3 hours, but its impact lasted generations. That's the power of quiet strength, the power of clarity, the power of discipline in the face of chaos, the power of beauty as resistance. These women were not special. They were not superhuman. They were school teachers and factory workers, mothers and daughters, lawyers and nurses, women from Vermont and California, women from small towns and big cities, women with fears and doubts, but women who chose to stand together. They chose to believe in themselves, in each other, in the possibility of change. If you take nothing else from this story, take this. You have strength you haven't discovered yet, like the women who marched on that cold March day in 1913. Quiet strength. But strength nonetheless. Change doesn't come from violence. It comes from people who refuse to be silenced, who refuse to be invisible, who refuse to accept the way things are when they could be different. The women of 1913 found that strength. And because they did, you have the freedom to find yours. Rest now. But tomorrow, remember, you are just as capable of courage as they were, just as capable of changing your world, just as capable of choosing to believe in something larger than yourself. That's the gift they left us. Not just the vote, but the knowledge that ordinary people can do extraordinary things when they choose to believe. Sleep well, my friends. You've walked alongside 6,000 brave women on a cold March morning in 1913. You've felt their courage, you've seen their determination, you've witnessed their quiet strength, and that strength is still alive, in us, waiting to be discovered, waiting to be chosen, waiting to change the world.